Welcome back to the Changemaker Podcast. My guest today is Steve Cassell, a very dear friend of mine, old friend of mine from my time as mayor. Mr. Cassell is an executive member of ISM. He has over 25 years of experience encompassing several aspects of the civil engineering, most notably traffic and transportation engineering. So you are an Ohio State graduate. Your bio is so long, I'm just going to leave it at that because I want to cut to the chase.
Welcome to the Changemaker Podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
You are also directing our cleanup efforts for the city of Augusta, which is a role you played during the ice storm in 2014 when I was still in office. You did a phenomenal job. I am so glad that you're on point on this, but just for our listeners and our viewers, just describe a little bit about, how you got into this and how you see our cleanup efforts going.
Well, how I got into this, that's a very interesting story. The city did a reorganization back in 2011, and somehow trees got put up underneath traffic engineering. So when the ice storm came in, I didn't know what an ice storm was. I was up north. I'm like, it's just going to be, there's going to be some leaning trees. So when the whole world came crashing down, everybody said, well, you're over trees. Good luck. And so I had contractors and our whole staff was just focused on this stuff, on getting the roads open and cleaned up. And it was so massive. But as I started hearing from people like what we needed to be doing, I started doing a little bit more research and think we need to start getting this to a bigger contractor with a unit cost, and here's what we're facing. And so I learned a lot on the fly, been able to absorb it. And so when that happened, I pulled in Ashbrook, and we had Lidos, and we came in and we cleaned up the city, and it was the most impressive thing. And just I went through so much. I think I lost 3 years off my life from that one. But it's sort of like Masters traffic. When I did that, it was like every day I would see something. Nobody even knew that something went wrong, but I would be like trying to figure, man, I wish I had another shot at that. And so when this one happened, and they asked me to come in and just help them, I'm like, okay. Here's what I learned last time. Okay, we need to do this. We need to do this. We'll divide it up into zones. I need I need a site that's going to be close to this, so that we can reduce the haul routes or the haul length times. When the truck picks up, dumps, and gets back, it's plays such a key role in the whole cleanup effort. Because if I can shorten that by half, like I can get one or two more loads. We've got almost 100 haul units at about 60 cubic yards each. That's about 6,000 cubic yards of haul capacity on the streets at any point, and we're collecting about 30,000. So if I can get one more out of that, I can get up to 40,000. And so and I just think about it. If you look out at Eisenhower and see the mountain of stuff that's out there, and that's just one site we have. And they're going to grind that up and haul that off soon. But to your question is, I don't know how I got into this. But it's some of it really it gets me. I do enjoy when talking to people who are receptive to understanding the whole issue and making them feel better about it. I stop on the streets all the time. You see somebody with a bad look. I say, man, honey, it's the worst thing. We all know what's wrong. Yeah, like. You're not going to a doctor and he has no clue what's wrong with you. That's the worst feeling in the world. But we'll get through it. Just move on to the next thing.
Well, I'll tell you, it's interesting because so many people I've spoken to, particularly locally, say there's nothing in the national news about this. And people from outside the area are like, I had no idea that Augusta got hit so bad. But we effectively took a direct hit from Hurricane Helene. And, but most people don't know it. I want to get your take on this, though, too, because I think that that's a blessing in a way. And people say, well, we can't raise money if people outside the area. But when you look at what happened in Western North Carolina, there were groups that went in and intentionally distributed misinformation or disinformation. So that didn't happen here. I'm not seeing that happen here. So the fact that we flew a little bit under the radar screen has allowed for better information flow without the insertion of misinformation or disinformation there.
Yeah, I agree. To your point about this taking this direct hit, because it wasn't even projected to come this way.
No.
And I've told this story probably 30 times, but I woke up at 3:30 in the morning to turn my sprinkler system off because I'd just gotten new sod and it had been all that rain. And when I looked out and saw green leaves on the ground, I said, that's more than 30-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
And that's when I heard the first thump. And then at some point, I heard my car pretty much explode when a tree landed on it. And so it pulled my family in, and I lived a horrible 2 hours. But then you go around and you see some people really are going to have some PTSD over this. But I have friends that live in Florida, and they're like, it's just a Category 1. Like, no. I've developed a new appreciation for the ignorance of people who ride these things out.
Yeah.
Because,
oh my gosh.
Because I didn't want to. I wouldn't have ridden it out if I'd have known that was going to happen. And but I just hope that there's so much good, and people try to help out at the beginning. Neighbors got out and cut up and opened the roads, and and now people are staring at the debris piles and they're getting frustrated. And what's interesting is that I don't hear any more chainsaws as much, but the quiet is also concerning because I'm not hearing a lot of hammers and nails going on either.
Yeah.
But I know there's a lot of construction that needs to be done, and so that if the recovery, the insurance checks or whatever, it's not coming in fast enough, because despite what people want to think, the roof protects you from rain, but also protects you from little animals that come into your house too. Yeah, and that's where they're going to start coming too.
Well, and I saw it happen in the wake of the ice storm. We came together as a community like never before. I feel the same thing is happening here now. And people, I know you remind them to be patient, but the way our community is coming together, and I want your take on this. So I've been engaged at the grassroots level for nearly 2 decades now.
Yes.
And I've just seen the community change at the grassroots level. The politics, not always, but I just think we have this real opportunity because people get on their beaten paths, right? You get on your routine, people are taking their kids to ball games, getting the kids to school and everything. But and I know the abject poverty that some people in this community live in. And so I think this disruption is really showing people, a situation. I was at, we've got 14 churches working together. And there's one out on the south side. It's a Black Baptist church that they have totally transformed that church. The minister is amazing. But he was saying, in my neighborhood, we've done a lot of help the neighborhood, sort of redevelop in a way. But he said, there's a house across the street. There are 16 kids in that house. There is no adult. And I'm like, so I have a lady that she has cancer. She went into hospice the week of the storm. And so she was in the hospital when the storm hit. She couldn't get back in her house. And she said, I really need your help. So I went out to see her. She was in a hotel room, in not the best area of town, but she was in that hotel room with her son, her daughter-in-law, and their 2 toddler little girls. They had one bed and a cot. And so I'm like, I'm using those stories to share with people. I get that not having cable is an inconvenience and not being without power for an extended period of time is, but I'm like, these are the people that we really need to help through this event.
Yeah, and I like you, and I'm not trying to sound magnanimous or anything like that, but I've been in every area of the city. I've met everybody from the chairman of the Augusta National all the way down to somebody in abject poverty, like you said, and there's a misconception about some folks that live down there, and that being that they're whatever freeloaders looking for stuff. And the actual, I would say, on a greater percentage, it's the opposite. So most of them are too proud to ask for help.
Yeah.
And they're doing things on their own. They're doing things with family members pitching in, or somebody's. There's a whole system. They're logistically geniuses on how they're able to make sure that everything works, that the kids picked up, brought here, taken to whatever, and they're not asking. They're just going out and making it work, and very, very proud folks. I always enjoyed talking to them because that really opened my eyes from what the media does not do a good job of portraying those stories. But that's my biggest concern during this whole thing is those areas, because,
the lower income neighborhoods,
right? Because if they don't have insurance, or if they do have insurance, it's and what's getting ready to come and how much construction needs to be done. If this becomes a bidding war, they're gonna lose out on the bidding war at all time, because they're only going to have the money. Most of them will only have the money that the check provides, and if the prices go through the roof, which I would assume that they will, then they may be living with a blue tarp for 4 or 5 years.
Well, it's interesting. We started a prayer breakfast my first day in office. 19 years later, it's still going on. But I'll never forget a black Presbyterian minister, Melvin Lowry, who was the pastor at Bell Terrace Presbyterian Church, said that first year, he said, you know what? He said, we labor under a mindset of scarcity when we serve a God of abundance. And I'm like, that's the way I've always pictured Augusta, that we have resources that other communities could only dream of. But I think this gives us an opportunity. So we labor under a mindset of scarcity sometimes, that, well, my district's not getting this or my district's not getting that. But we have abundant resources. I think if we can collectively combine those resources in coordinated fashion, coming through the recovery process, we can, I don't even like the term build back better because it's so politicized, but we can come out of this a much stronger community, in the wake of the storm. And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, my friend Jimmy Smith one time with DOT told me,
God rest his soul.
No, it's different.
No,
Jimmy
wrong
Smith.
Jimmy Smith.
Jimmy
Sorry,
Smith,
Jimmy.
God bless his soul. He was Georgia DOT, and his wife died of cancer. And he said something at her funeral that everybody talks about what cancer takes away from you.
Yeah.
And he says, but cancer actually gives you something that you don't know, and that's priorities. You really start seeing what's important at that point. And I think that's what something like this will happen, is all of a sudden some of that stuff becomes very petty, and it'll provide us the focus on what needs to be done. And that's the hope is, but the other thing is, you said, with people with the resources wanting to come in, they also want to be directed to where they're efficiently and not wasted and stuff like that, because what you hear after these storms is the corruption. There might be one person who misuses some funds, but that paints everybody with the broad brush of what these funds were doing. And because it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for the people who provide funds. Just like you in one sense, you're trying to give people money as quick as they possibly can because they need things, and most of them do. But then somebody will go buy shoes with it, and that becomes the story. And so, but people don't realize how widespread this is, know, and so, but because sometimes I think everybody's caught in their little world of like, oh man, mine's really bad. But everybody's got a sad story. And in somewhere in the world, there's the saddest story in the world right now. But mine's probably not nowhere on. It doesn't eat the radar. But I've seen some things here where you're just like, wow, how are we ever going to get this? But I saw the same thing at the ice storm, so I know what's going to happen. It's just going to take time and money.
Well, it's interesting. So I interact with all these different groups doing all these different things. One is a group that's working, CityServe is working on putting on an event for local citizens, November 16th on the Augusta Commons, to honor our Helene heroes, first responders, just all the people that were out there in the middle of it. But I was saying, I think I made that comment on we haven't seen the misinformation take hold. And a lady from the marshal's office said, I know, she said, me and all of my colleagues, everybody was thanking us for everything we were doing. They were bringing us water. They were bringing us food if they could. And I'm like, that is what I see out on the ground. But I tell all of these groups, and I've always talked to everybody, which is a blessing, but I'm like, in this situation, unfortunately, politics are going to play into it. They do in every situation. But I'm like, if we as a community as a whole, at the grassroots level, can really focus on putting people over politics, and I will preach that to the politicians too, but this is a chance. We're a community. We take care of each other, and I think people are going to really realize how blessed they are to live in a community like ours and seeing the way we come through this.
Right. I mean, I agree, and I haven't seen that. I did a presentation for commission yesterday I think I was up for about an hour, but the politics didn't come through at all. I think everybody realizes, this, for whatever reason, and I want to do a thing. I think the higher the elevation, the harder it was hit. That's in my mind. I see it when I'm driving around. That's why the highest elevations, of course, is up here, and that looks like ground zero. But I think that the commission as a whole understands that. But they were also hit. So how do I? It's hard. I hate to use the term priority, because if this is my if I say that's the priority, then that means you're not, and that's not the case. It's everything's, I'm trying to, so it's sort of a balance on how you word things, but I haven't, and there's times when people are bored, that their ears are more sensitive than they usually are, but they're not right now. I think it's supportive. I think the frustration that they have is the same frustration I have that I have when I have to tell them is I don't have a schedule. No. Like we're doing this, and we're trying to get it out faster than it's coming back on the streets. And when that happens, I remember during the ice storm, it was probably about day 35, I want to say, where I started to see the numbers drop. And I got on the contractor, man, what's happening? And he's like, well, we're getting ahead of it. You're starting to see. So then it's kind of like, it's almost like a Pareto distribution, then it just starts going off real quick. And that's the encouraging part about not hearing many chainsaws right now, but is I think there's a finite amount of debris that can be out there. Yeah. But I could tell you, if you think your area is bad, give me a call and tell me where you live, and I'll take you to an area that's worse. There was some people that lived through a horrible, horrible night that day, and because the people in Florida, I mean, you had a 2 days evacuation notice. Yeah, there's people that didn't know anything was hitting until they heard it snap and crash.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is eye opening to see some of the stuff, and if you really want, Google Street View, I think was one of the greatest things that ever invented until today. If you go to the corner of Almond and Walton Way, or Almond and Wheeler, which I always think of like this, that was my first introduction to Augusta, was when I came in here for the Masters in 2001. And I drove down Wheeler Road and got stuck in traffic, and just looked and like, wow, look at these trees, look at the flowering trees, and the dogwoods, the Bradford pears, the cherry trees. It was awesome. I mean, and to see it now,
oh my gosh!
If you look on the Google Street View went through during the spring, so you're seeing the flowering stuff, and you're looking at it now, especially if you look at Almond and Walton Way. It's just like I did a presentation yesterday, and I showed the Street View versus what it looks like today, and I mean, I wish. It's going to be rough for a minute. I don't think people are focused on the stuff on the ground, and they haven't looked up yet. And it's going to be a sad spring.
Well, I just want to. So I've made the point.
I don't even know if I answered your question.
No, you did. Talking. You did. But I'm like, we are not, as human beings, we are not bound together by our strength. We're bound together by our weakness and our vulnerability. And so I think that storm showed it didn't matter how much or how little you had. We were all impacted by it. I said the same thing with me going through cancer. It makes you realize just how vulnerable we all are. But I think that can be a connection point in really seeing the humanity in each other and saying, hey, I got destroyed by the storm. I know you did too. One thing that we didn't experience during the ice storm was we had no loss of life. And unfortunately, that has not been the case here. So and not that I want any sympathy from anybody listening, but people do know Augusta, Georgia, but it is, I mean, we have people whose homes were completely destroyed. I've got people that I know that are like, it's going to be a year and a half. So, but let's talk a little bit about what comes after, because you and I have had many conversations. We really, the cleanup's going to happen, but when you're talking about, we need to focus on reforestation. We need to focus on housing, because all these people being displaced and everything. So this is a very complex issue going forward, and it's not going to be 6 months from now. But I will say that creates empathy too, because I had a guy that Walter Clay that owns French Market Grill. He said, I always looked at what happened in Florida with these hurricanes, and it's like, oh well, in 6 months they're fine. So I never realized the magnitude of this. But talk a little bit about what we need to be focusing on after the cleanup's done.
After the cleanup, there's so much. And my parents live in Destin, so Mexico Beach got wiped out when I think it was Michael that came in there, and so a lot of those were displaced into Destin. So my sister would tell me stories about people who, paid up front to a contractor who never came back. They lost all, everything.
Yeah.
And so there's a double disaster. There's the human vulnerability of trusting somebody and then having that violated, which to completely, as Jordan Peterson said, will destroy your whole map of the world.
Yep.
And so it brings yourself into question on your ability to judge character and everything. And he also said that, you don't know who you are when you're sitting in an air-conditioned room with a roof over your head.
Oh, exactly.
Just strip down naked and throw you into a dark forest. That's who you are.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we probably discovered at this point. Some people pick it up, and some people want to scream at somebody.
Yeah.
And some are productive, some are counterproductive.
Yeah.
And my thing is, I'll do anything, but I'll stand on what I think is right in the absence of an alternative solution that I think is better. But I'll always steer the course, and if I'm not being of value, then I can go find me something else to do.
Yeah.
But the next step is going to be the difficult thing, because if we bring in housing, for instance, there's got to be a path and a motivation to get it. That is just a step on its own. It cannot be a permanent solution. So, and I'm not ripping on Georgia Power or any of the power companies, but I will say that the whole grid, if you really look at it, is nothing but a Band-Aid, because we have it destroyed. They get the power back on, everybody forgets about it. Okay, and so it's got to be. That was the very vulnerable thing about here. And when I saw transmission lines down, I was like, "Uh-oh, we're screwed." That didn't happen in the ice storm, and that doesn't happen. That only happens in tornadoes, basically. And we had some of that down, and that's not like your typical lineman that can come in and fix that. That's a very specialized thing. And and transformers at substations, I mean, whether you know it or not, most of those are handmade. Like that's not something that's off the shelf.
Yeah.
They're specifically made for that location. And but with that said, and I think I'm rambling a little bit. It's just
you've had a little bit on your plate here.
A little bit of exhaustion, but we've got to be prepared to stay the course, because like you said, I'm the same way. When you see that a flood, okay, that's Florida.
Yeah,
they'll be over in a minute, and you realize that no, it takes a while, and And the first step is we got to get cleaned up. But we got to have a plan for when we cleaned up, because we had infrastructure that's damaged. The wood thing, we haven't had any rain.
None.
And I was joking with the FEMA director yesterday. He said, well, if you have a heavy storm, I said, I realize we've had at my house, I've had 3 500-year storms this year. Started one in January, it had 6.5 inches of rain in 3 hours. I had 2.5 inches of rain in about 30 minutes a couple weeks later, and then this one was 14 inches in 2 days. So that's once in every 500-year event. No, it happened 3 times in one. So it's a probability. I hate the term 500-year storm, by the way, because it makes we're good for 500 years. No, because you might get a 499-year storm tomorrow. And so it all exists. It's all on that thing. And so that would, if we had something like that hit with the storm drains covered like they are, in some cases damaged. Sewage, we don't know. I think we're finding sewage leaks. Wes is having to deal with that on top of what's going on with the canal and the water supply. So we've got to look to really not only rebuild it, but like you said, build back better and strengthen. There's going to be some changes of things that people are used to, such as the canal, that you're not going to like because you've enjoyed those trees. Those trees are coming off.
Yeah.
A lot, and in most cases because the root balls have torn into an earthen dam that's since almost 189 years old or whatever, and so that we've got to protect it, the vulnerabilities, because now we've seen what can happen.
Yeah.
And
so for our listeners and viewers, the Augusta Canal Natural Heritage Area, which is a corridor green along the Augusta Canal and Savannah River that stretches, between downtown Augusta and literally Columbia County, which is our suburb county. But they called it Augusta Central Park. It is beautiful, but as you say, it's so well treed, but that's something that, nobody would have ever expected something of this size to hit Augusta, Georgia, or our community as a whole.
When I had to write the letter to FEMA, when Wes first kind of said, I need you to look at this, and I had to tell him, there's nothing. This is the only one in the United States. You've never dealt with this. You have to figure there has to be a path. That's why it doesn't fit into the little thing. I mean, it's it was built in 1845. It's still serving the same purpose it was built for. And in some cases, some of the equipment that it's using is an antique. You go to where the head gates are. I mean, that's still gears that were made in 1873. The diversion dam was put in 1845, and it's still there, and it's still functioning. It's still doing what it's done. The only difference is it's not towing the raw materials around the thing anymore. That the trees have grown up on the banks, because you used to have oxen pulling it down, and so the trees didn't grow. But now that it's from neglect, it became a gym, and now it's become a gym, and now it's become like, okay, now we probably need to start really thinking about this thing again. Yeah,
and that's but I do want to talk about this too. So my wife and I, had more than our fair share of trees down, and we had 2 cars destroyed. One tree hit the house. We had a shed that was destroyed, but people are always saying, oh man, I'm so sorry for your yard. We're like, that we've got insurance and we're fine, we're healthy. But even with those massive fines that came down on ours, we've still got some tree coverage. We didn't lose any magnolias, which was amazing, and I don't think even any oaks. But you and I were discussing last weekend, and for our local listeners or viewers that haven't already done this, so a lot of people just knee-jerk reaction are clear-cutting their lots, which is, we've already lost, tree coverage like we have never seen. We got to talk about reforestation, and that's just exacerbating the problem.
Right. And there's some people out there, and I said it yesterday, and I'll say it till I turn blue in the face. You're going to regret what you've done. Yeah. And because right now it's cool out. Wait till when you can't use your back porch because the sun's beating down on you, and you can't, and your sprinklers, your grass is dying because it's getting beat down, and you're having to do all this stuff with the sprinkler system. But it reminds me a lot of the toilet paper during the COVID thing. It's like you're seeing your neighbors do it, and you think that maybe am I the dumb one? I don't want to be the one left with a tree on my house the next time. And you've got a contractor who's coming in here and willing to do it cheaper because he claims he doesn't have to haul it off. And then you realize that after it's stacked on the street is, oh crap, that's when they panic. Oh, they're gonna come get this, and that's what you're seeing. Almond Road, I'm not blaming anybody out there for what they did, but I can tell you Almond Road does not feel like that should have been occurring. And I know that I've heard of neighborhood associations that are desperately telling their residents, you still need approval to remove these trees. And they're like, screw you, I'm cutting them down. Yeah. And, and that's in your old neighborhood is what I've heard. And then so I didn't panic, but I have trees that I can't believe didn't fall because I've been wanting to cut them down forever, but I'm too cheap. It's still too cheap. I'm not going to do it. I refuse. My wife would say, I will not wait in a gas line. I refuse to participate in any panic. And
me too.
Because that just says more about you than it does anybody. Like I said, that's me naked in the forest. If that's what you're going to do. But and I'll probably remove them at some point. But the car that got destroyed, I really loved it. And my daughter knew that, so she started crying when it she's like, "I'm sorry about your car. I know you." I don't give a crap about that car. I mean, you're okay. Like, that my biggest concern was I don't want to see something's out of my control if something comes through the house and hits her, and I can't protect her from that. And luckily nothing happened like that, but it did happen to some people. Yeah. And I've heard stories about getting the kids out of the bed and the tree crashed through and hit the bed the next day, and so there's this sort of, I don't know if you probably have PTSD, survivor's guilt, something of what happened, and you just gotta put that aside. You owe it to yourself to just say, I'm here for a purpose.
And that's to me. So for our listeners and viewers, my dad bought for my mom a 1986 Wagoneer in 1986. It remained in the family for 38 years. My brother had it before he passed. He had purchased it from her in the late 80s. After he passed, his family said, well, it needs to go to you. Had it totally redone. Beautiful. 38 years old. That truck had been to the University of Georgia with me, on other university campuses with my nephew. So I know it was, the driving was questionable at times, but not even a fender bender. But people are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you lost the Wagoneer. I'm like, it's 38 years of wonderful memories that no one can take away, and to have had it for that long. But my wife and I are like, it's wood and it's stuff. That's the main thing. But I feel like, most people have, a good perspective on this, though. And it does make you sort of check yourself and think about being naked in the woods. But I was telling somebody this morning, I said, and you were our traffic engineer when I was in office. I always had this at the forefront of my mind in any leadership position. I would tell people, I think leaders set the tone. And people would say, well, what do you mean? I said, okay, when the Great Recession hit in 09, 010, and when the ice storm and such, I'm like, okay, if I'm on a plane and we hit turbulence and I look at a flight attendant and they look calm, I'm calm. If they look panicked, I might not feel quite so good. So I'm like, in leadership positions, and it's like you said, I'm never going to panic, because if I don't maintain my composure and my cool, then it's just going to lead to other people losing theirs. So God bless you. And I never went through the toilet paper lines or the gas lines either. It's just, people calm down, man.
Yeah, it's that is, especially that. I'm just telling you. I could tell a story. There's people who've said some stuff to me. I remember the ice storm. I'd be like, man, I thought we were friends. But they get that, that frustration of, because what's coming in April. And a lot of people rely on that income for renting their houses. So that's when the panic is really going to start hitting, I would say, about mid-February. My plan, and people keep asking me if you change your deadline, I'm not giving up on 90 days. I'm just not. I refuse to. We're not even halfway there yet. Why would I give up? Yeah. And so we keep increasing it. And maybe I'll be foolish, but to even think that. But I don't see any reason. On day 89, I may actually say, okay, it's going to be 90 days, but I'm still going to do it. Our goal was before. I never would have thought by starting on February 26th. For the massive cleanup for the ice storm, I would have been done by before Masters, but the Friday before Masters, I was done.
I remember it well.
Because the problem is what people don't realize is they were going to get kicked out of their hotels. It was going to have to shut down for a week anyway, and so we finished it. But but the thing is not necessarily get it all cleaned up; is getting it to a manageable level where we could start fixing the stuff that got broken. That you really rely on that you don't understand. It's like Brad Means asked me what infrastructure is, and infrastructure is anything that makes you mad when it's not functioning.
Yeah, well, that's a good definition of it.
So the traffic signal, it's the drain that's stopped up. It's it's your phone when you have no service. So everything is infrastructure. If it's not doing what you take for granted, it's operation, and then it doesn't work, and you realize Damn, it's why, all of a sudden, you'll get a call, somebody have a bad day driving, a signal will be screwed up, and all of a sudden they'll project that out. This is like this all the time. Like, no, it's just it's an issue. We got to fix that stuff.
Well, I mean, for me, I believe in the resiliency of the human spirit, and we've talked about. I came through cancer and never had a side effect or anything. I know we'll get through this, but I because we've got local people like you, I know we're going to be fine. But I tell people, I'm like, look, change in our nation and recovery in our nation across a lot of different lines of difference politically too. I'm like, it has to start at the local level, because that's where the rubber meets the road. And I'm like, if you're just waiting for Washington to ride in and cure all the problems in your community, it ain't never going to happen.
Yeah, it's I don't remember the speech, but in the Field of Dreams, when James Earl Ray gives that speech on baseball stand at test time, it's just, you could apply that to anything. You'd be inspired, I guess. But and God rest his soul. I mean, hopefully I guess there'll be no more Darth Vader movies.
Oh, man.
But and that's it. I mean, I think that they thought we would, it would take us 1,000 years when they first bought the Louisiana Purchase to clear that, to make it livable, and they did it in like 100 years. And they did it without machinery.
Yeah.
And so what's getting lost is that, I don't know, America can come together in ways that they don't realize it until it happens. It's like when, we were shortage of water. And you'd be surprised. You go from having nothing to having more than you can handle in a couple of days once you get the word out. And so it was sort of like what happened in World War II. When we built the machine up, the hard part is stopping it once it's going. Yeah. And so you've got to make sure you direct it in the right area, because it will. Yeah. It'd be like a fire hose. And I think it's what's going to happen here. I think Augusta will come through, and we'll. We're almost 300 years old. Yeah, and people don't realize we were 200 years old before the first Masters. Yeah, but that's what we've become is the golf capital, and it's a great place over there. But if you go about 5 miles down past it, you'll see a pretty cool area too. Yeah, the downtown. And when I got here in 2006, or since we was doing the '06, since we go, downtown was dead. Yeah. It wasn't. There was no street lights really that were worth anything. But now you've got residents here. You got businesses open, great restaurants. It's a great atmosphere, and that didn't get destroyed by this. So we've got what we need to stay strong. At least we didn't have our main source of gathering place or whatever. The heartbeat of the area, I guess, would be that. It didn't get destroyed. It's not like we're a coal miner's town and the mine shut down. We've got it here. We just got to direct it.
Well, I don't know that I've shared it on my podcast, but when I was in office, Billy Payne was chairman of the Augusta National, and he said, we are going to develop the Masters into the preeminent sporting event in the world. Not preeminent golf tournament, preeminent sporting event. So I always took that as my goal. That was the bar for me. I'm like, so we should become the preeminent mid-sized city in America. I honestly, with the community partners coming on board with this, with the nonprofit community, local government, the Augusta National is a huge community partner in this. I believe that we're going to be able to really come out of this and start to look and feel like that preeminent city. I honestly, that is the feel I get from people. And it's every group I talk to, whether it's churches, whether it's just the business community, everybody feels like this is our time to really, as I say, I think it's sad that it took this happening, but I think this is going to create a legacy for generations to come. And you're a big part of that, man.
Yeah. And what I don't want, and it's not, this out of my control, but, I'm assuming that when come April, the Masters coverage will talk about this event here. And it has to, pretty much. There's no other way to get around it, because they're going to come here and be shocked. People who come here year after year. But what I want them to portray it as, is sort of what we're doing moving forward. I don't want the victim mentality.
No, not at all.
I don't need the rest of the, I don't want everybody pour us. No, it's not. Listen, it happened. We took a punch and we'll go forward. But because when you panic or you feel sorry for yourself, you stay close. You don't move. And I tell my daughter when she was playing tennis, when she'd get upset and cry and stuff. I said, people who cry are out of options. Yeah. And so if we sit here and cry, that means we have no other option but to cry. So let's not cry. Let's just move forward. And we've got plenty of options. There's something you can do in the neighborhood. And if you're tired, you're frustrated, get out and help.
Exactly. And that's we can all volunteer. I tell people in this, I'm like, if you feel helpless, anybody who lives by themselves, check on them. Mm-hmm. That's something you can do. But I'll tell you, Steve, it's like I tell people that when I was diagnosed with cancer, I said, okay, I'm going to make you a deal. I don't want to know the stage. I don't want to know a prognosis. Mm-hmm. All I want to know is what can I do to get better? Mm-hmm. Because I'm not going to do any internet-based research because I'm just going to wrap your head in worry. But I'm like, what can I do? And there's always something that we can do.
Yeah. It's funny you said about the internet research. I had 2 neck surgeries. And when they first told me I had to have that, for some stupid reason, I decided to look it up and see what I was like, golly. Oh my gosh. They're gonna be using a Dremel tool on my neck and cut around this. And I was like, oh man. Just give me something. Even if what you're telling me to do takes my mind off of it and gives me something to work on until the end. But you just can't sit still. I mean, it's I'm as lazy as anybody else. But when it comes to I want to relax. But I haven't seen an Ohio State football game really since this. I watched one. I saw them lose to Oregon, so I'm 0 for 1.
Well, don't watch another one.
Yeah, I can't watch another one. So, because last week I was glad my sister, because I group text, everybody like, and so you're seeing the reactions on the text. Okay, good. I don't want to watch that anyway.
Yeah.
So, because I'm too cheap to have the trees that fell down, so I'm sawing away and hauling them out to the street log by log. I'm one of the people that are sitting there going, I hope they don't pick up yet because I still got more to get out.
Yeah. Well, as we get it down towards the end, and we could talk all day, I know.
Yeah,
and it's so good to be able to catch up. But I asked my guests 2 different questions. One, where can people find you? And if you need a good engineer, there's one sitting in the room with me.
Well, me and A.B. Latson, who was the director of engineering when I was here and worked for him, and we started our own firm back in 2019, ISM, Infrastructure Systems Management, and we do a little bit of everything. A lot of what we're doing is program management, is helping like the 2 of us for whatever reason know how to get things moving. We don't. We don't like the term wait. Just make it happen. Don't want to hear them waiting on this and waiting on that. Yeah. And so we've been fairly successful with public and private companies or private firms. We're doing a lot of work for the city of Augusta right now, especially with the Parks and Rec department. There was a lot of stalled SPLOST projects that we're getting moving to, and they, of course, then they're going to have this massive cleanup here. But we've also got an office in Albany, Georgia. We've got one in his hometown. A.B. grew up in Georgetown, Plantersville. This was north of Charleston. So when his father passed away, we opened a little office there to try to help. I never told this story before, but I actually applied for a job for Georgia DOT at one time when I knew I was going to, I just needed to move on for something. And when I talked to the commissioner, I said, I don't want to work in Atlanta. I'm like, I'll be the one person who does. Like, I want to work in towns this size. Yeah. Where a little, you can make a big difference with just a small little idea of, and I don't want to rip on Georgia DOT or anything like that, but they're good at building highways. And when they build a project in a city that's a scaled down highway, and context sensitive, but you fix the problem and make it work, and without widening the road and clearing out the clear zone. We've never had any wrecks, but all of a sudden we got to cut every tree because somebody might hit it. And so that's what we want to focus. I like to focus on the smaller areas and not compete for these billion-dollar projects. There's a lot out here that can be done that you could make a big difference. And sometimes the smaller towns lack the expertise or the ability to attract people because everybody chases money right now.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to young engineers, don't worry about money until you get 40. Get to what can get you the most experience. That's it. That's what people value in this world. What do you know how to do? Okay, I mean, I'm not impressed with titles, and I don't think anybody is. So when somebody starts throwing a title around, I say, okay, all right, you probably have your degrees behind you on your wall and every certificate you ever got in the world, and but what do you really bring to the table?
Yeah,
and so And I didn't answer your question again.
No,
but
you did.
But
people know where to find you.
We do. People have not had a hard time finding me lately. It seems that they've dusted off their old black book, found my phone number at some point. For the most part, people have been receptive. It's hard to give them information. I want to give them information, but if I make a promise, I just can't be one of those people who tell somebody what they want to hear. And if the answer is I don't know, that's it. I can't tell you right now. I can just tell you before it's done, you will be picked up.
Well, and going through this we've never experienced this. This is totally, new ground for us, but uncovered ground. But we will get through it together. And so, my last question is, on a daily basis, what brings joy to your heart and puts a smile on your face?
Honestly,
yeah,
it was and people, and this is so cliche, but the one day I took off, the very first day, my daughter played a tournament in Gaffney, South Carolina. It's over there near Columbia, and just watching her play, she is so good. I can't even stay on the court, and seeing her start to enjoy the competition. She's not getting upset anymore. She's going out there because she wants to kick somebody's rear end. And watching that, I was just like, I got choked up watching her play because she was, pumping her fist when something happened, and doing something. And if you knew the circumstances behind it, it was a lot of pressure on that championship match because she was actually playing against her former coach's new protege.
Oh, really?
And so, even though I tried to tell her, just go out there and play, don't worry about that, and she did, and she won that tournament. And then she's out at Mock Academy playing tennis out there. And the one thing that sucks about her driving is I don't have an excuse to go out there and watch, so I really have to be a helicopter parent to do it.
Yeah.
But seeing her, and watching her grow up and seeing, and seeing some stuff that she's doing that she's doing, either following my footsteps. Some of it's probably bad.
Yeah. Well,
she's kind of caught my sense of humor, which it's funny as hell. But it's some people don't always get it.
Yeah.
But she's a great kid, and that's when I leave this earth, I will have that as an accomplishment. I think I'm leaving the world in good hands with her. She frustrates us sometimes, but no, that's my buddy. I can have more fun teasing her or do whatever. But watching her do something and want to be successful is awesome.
Well, man, I will tell you, Steve, thank you for being a great leader for our community. Thank you for taking this on to clean up after Hurricane Helene, because it is a mammoth job. I agree with you. I'm I don't care about titles. I can still help my community not being mayor in this situation. And we've had the opportunity to be friends for so long. Thank you for your friendship, but thank you for being an awesome guest.
No, thank you. And I get long-winded on everything.
That's okay.
I'm not in love with my own voice. I promise you that. Sometimes my filter is a little bit off. But no, I moved to Augusta in 2006 on a 5-year plan, and I'm still here 17, 18 years later because it just grew on me. I mean, it's still, like I said, the first time I came through Wheeler Road, who would have thought that I'm sitting here thinking this traffic's a mess. Somebody needs to do something about this. And these trees are beautiful. Now the traffic's fixed, and the trees, I'm picking them up off the ground. It's sad, but it's not so sad that we can't move forward in Augusta. it's going to be interesting to see the next phase of what we become out of this. I think it's going to be really good.
I do too. We will be like the phoenix, rising from the ashes.
Yes, exactly. What happens after the fire is done? What's left is an egg.
Exactly. Well, guys, that's all the time we got. Dropping the mic, and we are out. Hey, guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.